Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. I think I just injured my knee. I don't know how I did that sitting down, but I'm fine. Everything's going to be okay. Yeah, let's just get into some climate change news, extreme weather, again, rearing its ugly head. Climate change blamed as flooding forces thousands to evacuate in Canada. This is ongoing. This is from yesterday, April 29th, 2019. Flooding in 4 Canadian provinces has forced thousands of people to evacuate, and leaders across the country are blaming climate change. Communities in Manitoba, New Brunswick, Ontario, and Quebec are all impacted, and both Montreal and Ottawa have declared states of emergency, CTV News reported Saturday. The flooding comes just 2 years after heavy rain and snowmelt contributed to the worst floods in decades in Ontario and Quebec, according to Global News. This flooding is happening here in Quebec, it's happening in Ontario, it's happening in New Brunswick, and really sadly, what we thought was a 1 in 100 year flood, what we thought, oddly worded, were 1 in 100 year floods are now happening every 5 years, in this case, every 2 years. Environment Minister Catherine McKenna said Thursday, according to Global News, I remember sandbagging with folks in both Ontario and Quebec just 2 years ago. People whose houses were being affected, whose lives are being affected. We know that climate change is real. We are going to continue to see this. Yep. And here in the United States, evacuations ordered in Davenport, Iowa, as floodwaters breach flood wall. This is crazy. So a lot of downtown Davenport is underwater. I'm going to play a little bit of this video from Dabu.
Officials saying that the flood wall that they had up has been breached, and now the area is being flooded in downtown, and some areas have people that are being rescued off of their rooftops because the flooding is continuing. Now you're looking at a shot here. You can see where the water has risen, and you can see where they had it sandbagged back here. This truck submerged in the water. And there's actually, if we zoom in here off this side, you can see someone in the water right there, waist high, trying to make their way through it.
Crazy stuff. Yeah, scary times for people in Davenport, Iowa. My heart goes out to all the people that are dealing with this insane situation, and it just continues. What is this year going to bring? I can only wonder. As climate change just continues to escalate to go exponential. We're seeing like seriously high temperatures already in April in Asia. We're seeing flooding everywhere. We're seeing wildfires already all over the place. This is already a year of extreme weather, and we're only 4 months in. I'm going to read a quick thing. This is from Nick Humphrey. This is like a quick little blog post. And he linked UN report to highlight urgent need for nature rescue plan. April 29th, 2019, by Marlo Hood. Diplomats from 130 nations gather in Paris from Monday to validate a grim UN assessment of the state of nature and lay the groundwork for an 11th hour rescue plan for life on Earth. That is wild. So this is from today. And this is titled, I Brought You Into This World, I Can Take You Out. The trifecta for the 6th mass extinction event, abrupt climate change, exponential resource depletion, and growing pollution are all extreme. Humanity globally is throwing the Earth's biosphere into the wood chipper. Some nations are more responsible for one more than others, and some are very responsible for all. But Earth does not understand such human differences. It only responds by amplifying what humans have done and are doing currently according to the physics, thermodynamics, and biology governing us, accelerating to the state reflective of the heat, chemicals, and loss of soils, vegetation we are producing. How? By laying waste to the biosphere, humans tried to be the gods over nature, and the only deity was the one under our feet, with its commandments being the physical laws of the universe. I brought you into this world, and I can take you out. Not just the scary pronouncement from your angry mother toward your delinquencies. It's shameful that, in this case, many other species on this planet will pay for our delinquencies as well. Excerpt. The impact of humanity's expanding footprint and appetites has been devastating. Up to 1 million species face extinction, with many within decades, according to the report, and 3/4 of the Earth's land surface has been severely altered. 1/3 of ocean fish stocks are in decline, and the rest, barring a few, are harvested at the very edge of sustainability. A dramatic die-off of pollinating insects, especially bees, threatens essential crops, valued at $500 billion annually. 10-year targets adopted in 2010 under the United Nations Biodiversity Treaty to expand protected areas, slow species and forest loss, and reduce pollution will, with one or two exceptions, fail badly. So I'm going to link this, and you guys can check out Nick on his Patreon blog and support him there. And lastly, in this video, I'm going to read this article from Counterpunch. This is from April 26, 2019, by Tom Engelhart, Suicide Watch on Planet Earth. As Notre Dame burned, as the flames leapt from its roof of ancient timbers, many of us watched in grim horror. Hour after hour, on screen after screen, channel after channel, you could see that 850-year-old cathedral, a visiting spot for 13 million people annually, being gutted, its roof timbers flaring into the evening sky, its steeple collapsing in a ball of fire. It was dramatic and deeply disturbing, and of course, unwilling to be left out of any headline-making event, President Trump promptly tweeted his advice to the French authorities. Perhaps flying water tankers could be used to put it out. Must act quickly. No matter that water from such planes would probably have taken the cathedral's towers down and endangered lives as well. The equivalent, according to a French fire chief, of dropping 3 tons of concrete at 250 kilometers per hour on the ancient monument. Still, who could doubt that watching such a monument to the human endeavor being transformed into the shell of its former self was a reminder that everything human is mortal, that whether in a single lifetime or 850 years, even the most ancient of our artifacts, like those in Iraq and Syria recently, will sooner or later be scourged by the equivalent, or even quite literally by fire and sword, that nothing truly lasts, even the most seemingly permanent of things, like, until now, Notre Dame. Or Notre Dame. That cathedral in flames, unlike so much else in our moment, including you-know-who in his every waking moment, deserved the front and center media attention it got. Historically speaking, it was a burning event of the first order. Still, it's strange that the most unnerving, deeply terrifying burning underway today, not of that ancient place of worship that lived with humanity for so many tumultuous centuries, but of the planet itself, remains largely in the background. When the cathedral in which Napoleon briefly crowned himself emperor seemed likely to collapse, it was certifiably an event of headline importance. When, however, the cathedral, if you care to think of it that way, in which humanity has been nurtured all these tens of thousands of years, on which we spread, developed, and became what we are today, I mean, of course, the planet itself, is in danger of an unprecedented sort from fires we continue to set, that's hardly news at all. It's largely relegated to the back pages of our attention, lost any day of the week to headlines about a disturbed, suicidal young woman obsessed with the Columbine school massacre, or an attorney general obsessed with protecting the president. And let's not kid ourselves, this planet of ours is beginning to burn, and not just last week or month either. It's been smoldering for decades now. Last summer, for instance, amid global heat records, Uruguay, Algeria, 124 degrees Fahrenheit. Hong Kong, over 91 degrees Fahrenheit for 16 straight days. Nawabshah, Pakistan, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Oslo, Norway, over 86 degrees Fahrenheit for 16 consecutive days. Los Angeles, 108 degrees Fahrenheit. Actually, it was hotter than that. Wildfires raged inside the Arctic Circle. This March, in case you haven't noticed, and why would you, since it's gotten so little attention, the temperature in Alaska was on average 20 degrees, yes, that is not a misprint, above normal, and typical ice roads between villages and towns across parts of that state were melting and collapsing with deaths ensuing. Meanwhile, in the Antarctic, ice is melting at a rate startling to scientists. If the process accelerates, global sea levels could rise far faster than expected, beginning to drown coastal cities like Miami, New York, and Shanghai more quickly than previously imagined. Meanwhile, globally, the wildfire season is lengthening. Fearsome fires are on the rise, as are droughts, and that's just to begin to paint a picture of a heating planet and its ever more extreme weather systems and storms. If you care to think of it that way, a whole Earth version of Notre Dame. The arsonists arrive. As was true with Notre Dame, when it comes to the planet, there were fire alarms before an actual blaze was fully noted. Take, for example, the advisory panel of scientists reporting to President Lyndon Johnson on the phenomenon of global warming back in 1965. They would, in fact, predict with remarkable accuracy how our world was going to change for the worse by this 21st century moment. And Johnson, in turn, would bring the subject up officially for perhaps the first time in a special message to Congress on February 5th, 1965, 54 years before Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal proposal. As that panel wrote at that time, through his worldwide industrial civilization, man is unwittingly conducting a vast geophysical experiment. Within a few generations, he is burning the fossil fuels that slowly accumulated in the earth over the past 500 million years. In other words, the alarm was first sounded more than half a century ago. When it comes to climate change, however, as the smoke began to appear, and in our own moment, the first flames began to leap. After all, the last 4 years have been the hottest on record, and despite the growth of ever less expensive alternative energy sources, carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere are still rising, not falling. No firemen arrived, just children. There were essentially no adults to put out the blaze. Yes, there was the Paris Climate Accord, but it was largely an agreement in principle without enforcement power of any genuine sort. In fact, across significant parts of the planet, those who appeared weren't firefighters at all, but fire feeders, who will likely prove to be the ultimate arsonists of human history. In a way, it's been an extraordinary performance. Leaders who vied for or actually gained power not only refused to recognize the existence of climate change, but were quite literally eager to aid and abet the phenomenon. This is true, for instance, of the new president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, who came to power prepared to turn the already endangered carbon sink of the Amazon rainforest into a playground for corporate and agricultural destroyers. It is similarly true in Europe, where right-wing populist movements have begun to successfully oppose gestures toward dealing with climate change, gaining both attention and votes in the process. In Poland, for instance, just such a party led by President Andrzej Duda has come to power, and the promotion of coal production has become the order of the day. And none of that compared to developments in the richest, most powerful country of all, the one that historically has put more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere than any other. On taking office, Donald Trump appointed more climate change deniers to his cabinet than might have previously seemed possible, and swore fealty to American energy dominance while working to kneecap the development of alternative energy systems. He and his men tried to open new areas to oil and gas drilling, while in every way imaginable striving to remove what limits there had been on big energy so that it could release its carbon emissions into the atmosphere unimpeded. And as the planetary cathedral began to burn, the president set the mood for the moment, at least for his vaunted base, by tweeting such things as, "It's really cold outside. They're calling it a major freeze, weeks ahead of normal. Man, we could use a big fat dose of global warming. Or on alternative energy, you would be doing windmills. If it doesn't, and if it doesn't blow, you can forget about television for that night. Darling, I want to watch television. I'm sorry, the wind isn't blowing. Among those who will someday be considered the greatest criminals in history, don't forget the big energy CEOs who, knowing the truth about climate change from their own hired scientists, did everything they could to increase global doubts by funding climate-denying groups, while continuing to be among the most profitable countries around. They even hedged their bets by, among other things, investing in alternative energy and using it to more effectively drill for oil and natural gas. And they are most likely also funding denier YouTube channels, or people out there saying like, yes, it's all a global conspiracy. It's all a hoax. Meanwhile, of course, the planet that had proven such a comfortable home for humanity was visibly going down. No, climate change won't actually destroy the Earth itself, just the conditions under which humanity and so many other species thrived on it. Sooner or later, if the global temperature is indeed allowed to rise a catastrophic 7 degrees Fahrenheit or 4 degrees Celsius, as an environmental impact statement from the Trump administration suggested it would by 2100, parts of the planet could become uninhabitable. Hundreds of millions of human beings could be set in desperate motion, and the weather could intensify in ways that might be nearly unbearable for human habitation. I'm sorry, at 4 degrees Celsius, we will not be able to grow food. So that will be that. Just read Davis Wallace Wells' The Uninhabitable Earth if you doubt me. This isn't even contestable information anymore, and yet it's perfectly possible that Donald Trump could be elected to a second term in 2020. It's perfectly possible that more right-wing populist movements could sweep into power in Europe. It's perfectly possible that Vladimir Putin's version of great powerdom, a sagging Russian petrostate, could continue on its present globally warming path well into the future. Understand this. Trump, Bolsonaro, Duda, Putin, and the others are just part of human history. Sooner or later, they will be gone. Climate change, however, is not a part of human history, whatever it may do to civilization as we know it. Its effects could, in human terms, last for almost unimaginable periods of time. It operates on a different time scale entirely, which means that, unlike the tragedies and nightmares of human history, it is not just a passing matter. Of course, the planet will survive, as will some life forms, as would be true even if humanity were to succumb to that other possible path to an apocalypse, a nuclear holocaust resulting in nuclear winter, but that should be considered small consolation indeed. Putting the planet on suicide watch. Consider global warming a story for the ages, one that should put Notre Dame's near destruction after almost 9 centuries in grim perspective. And yet the planetary version of burning, which should be humanity's crisis of all crises, has been met with a general lack of media attention, reflecting a lack of just about every other kind of attention in our world, except by those outraged children who know that they are going to inherit a degraded world and are increasingly making their displeasure about it felt. To take just one example of that lack of obvious attention, the response of the mega wealthy to the burning of Notre Dame was an almost instantaneous burst of giving. The euro equivalent of nearly $1 billion was raised more or less overnight from the wealthiest of French families and other 0.01 percenters. Remind me of the equivalent for climate change as the planet's spire threatens to come down. As for arsonists like Donald Trump in the matter of collusion, there's not even a question mark on the subject. In the United States, such collusion with the destroyers of human life on planet Earth is written all over their actions. It's beyond evident in the appointment of former oil and gas lobbyists and fellow travelers to positions of power. Will there, however, be the equivalent of a Mueller investigation? Will the president be howling witch hunt again? Not a chance. When it comes to Donald Trump and climate change, there will neither be a Mueller report nor the need for a classic Barr defense. And yet collusion, hell yeah. The evidence is beyond overwhelming. We are, of course, talking about nothing short of the ultimate crime, but on any given day of our lives, you'd hardly notice that it was underway. Even for an old man like me, it's a terrifying thing to watch humanity make a decision, however inchoate, to essentially commit suicide. In effect, there is now a suicide watch on planet Earth. Let's hope the kids can make a difference. Good stuff by Tom Engelhart, delineating where we are at in the timeline of climate change. It doesn't look good, but what he also did not include in that article, along with the kids, are also lots of left-wing movements, and also lots of climate change actions are starting to sprout and to grow and to coalesce and to take shape and to form. There are people taking action against the bullshit, against the horrors and the atrocities that are happening day after day. And we're going to be following those actions on this channel, and we're going to be chronicling those actions and hopefully taking part in those actions, and hopefully giving voice to the people and the planet and the animals, giving voice to the voiceless, and finding new ways to defend the defenseless against this ongoing catastrophe called climate change. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.